I stayed out of it.
I wondered if it was any of my business.
I kept quiet.
I haven't always known how to help.
But not anymore.
Because if you're experiencing abuse,
If I see you use the violence at home signal for help,
I will not judge you.
I will know what to do.
I will help you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. You've chosen to take action and learn critical skills to help address gender-based violence. You are part of a community that's working to end the stigma and silence on this issue. That's something to be proud of. Before we begin, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Closed captioning and sign language interpretation will be available throughout the event. To turn on closed captioning, please click the CC button at the bottom of your video feed. We'll be asking you to participate in a few polls throughout the event. When prompted, you'll find them under the Polls tab on the right side of your screen, next to the Chat tab. Should you experience any technical difficulties, please contact us through the chat or email us at info@fluidevents.ca for immediate assistance. Finally, a reminder that today's event will cover topics related to gender-based violence. Watch and participate as you feel comfortable, and know that you can always take a break. If you need, a certified counselor is on hand to provide crisis support and referrals to resources and services in your area. Simply call the number in the chat at any point during the event for up to 2 hours afterwards. This service is available only for this event. The Canadian Women's Foundation supports women, girls, and gender-diverse people to move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. The Signal for Help, which looks like this, is a tool that we launched in 2020 as the risk of gender-based violence spiked in the COVID-19 pandemic for those experiencing abuse to silently show they need help. If someone told you they were experiencing abuse, either with the Signal for Help or in another way, would you know how to respond? Maybe you do know how to respond in a helpful way. But if you're like many of us, you struggle with what to say, what to do, or how to help. Maybe you worry that getting involved would make matters worse. We're here together to do something about that, to learn how we can best support people facing abuse in a judgment-free way that puts them first. Together, we can shift the culture of stigma and silence around gender-based violence to a culture of support and action. Today, you'll have the opportunity to participate in 2 workshops to expand your knowledge and practice how you can support someone facing abuse. The first workshop will explore what it means to have a caring conversation, and the second will cover safe, supportive ways to reach out. On behalf of the Canadian Women's Foundation, thank you for joining our community of Signal for Help responders. We hope you find today informative and inspiring.
Thanks, Paulette. What a great start. Now we're going to go on to an important discussion on caring conversations. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I'll be your host for this first workshop. I'm joined by my 2 colleagues from the Canadian Women's Foundation, Anurada Dugal and Keitha Mercer. They're both here to chat with me about what we can all do to support a friend, a family member, or a colleague who may be dealing with abuse in a way that's free of judgment and puts them first. But first, I need to ask you a question. You should see it posted now. Just take a moment to read it and reflect on it, and if you're comfortable, respond with an honest answer. If someone told you that they were facing abuse, would you know how to support them in a way that is judgment-free? Please select a number between 1 to 5 that best reflects your current knowledge in this area, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. And as you enter your responses, I just want to remind everyone that there is a certified counselor available by phone today. They're available now and for up to 2 hours after this event if you need someone to talk to. They provide help for people in emotional and mental crisis, and they can refer you to helpful services in your area. We'll post the number for this counseling service in the chat. And of course, talking about violence can be difficult. Please watch and participate as you feel comfortable. And if you need to take a break, you can, and come back when you're ready. Don't hesitate to call one of our event counselors for support if you need it. And I see many of you have responded. We'll come back to this question later. Now I have a question for you, Anu. What exactly do we mean when we use the term caring conversations?
I think when we think about the different kinds of conversations that we might have in a day, there are many different kinds. So you might be just saying something to your partner about doing stuff around the house. You could be talking to your kids about homework, just checking in with friends, asking colleagues about workload or deadlines. Lots of these conversations might be transactional, or they might be, casual. But those are not the kind of conversations we're talking about here. A caring conversation is intentionally compassionate, and it's focused on that person and what they need. So it's non-judgmental. We don't want to have a sort of blame the victim kind of feeling when we're talking to those people. And we want to make that person who has been hurt or is being hurt, we want to create a feeling of safety for them so that there's no judgment. And when we make people feel safe, they also feel loved and cared for. So when we see the signal for help, or we know that somebody is facing abuse or someone confides in us, it's our role as signal for help responders to respond in a caring way. And these are caring conversations that we know can save lives.
How so?
Well, gender-based violence is an abuse that women, girls, and gender diverse people are statistically at much greater risk of experiencing, whether it's intimate partner violence, family violence, sexual assault, emotional abuse. It is all around us, but often we don't talk about it. So it's a cycle. It's something that's often repeated and has like a kind of pattern to it each time, and something that you notice over time. Even the person experiencing it may notice it over time. So people who face abuse can feel afraid, they can feel threatened. They're told, if you tell anyone, I'm going to hurt you, or I'm going to hurt the people you love, or I'm going to hurt your pet. They're made to feel like it's their fault. You made me do this. And people outside the situation looking in might just say, why don't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Or what did you do? You must have made this person angry, which all of taken together can actually lead to more risk for that person being hurt and for tragedies that really can be stopped.
Yes, there is a lot of stigma and silence around gender-based violence.
And when people go through violence, if they do tell someone about it, it's not usually the authorities. They may feel unsafe for many reasons. So they tend to go to close family, they go to friends, they go to co-workers, people they think they can trust. And this is why we all have to be aware of this culture of stigma and how we can, maybe without even realizing it, reinforce it. So we have to learn to recognize the signs of abuse and know how to respond in a caring, non-judgmental way. So whether you actually see somebody use the signal for help or not, all of us can proactively communicate with our loved ones that we will be caring in our responses to them no matter what. And I think collectively, these are actions that add up. And our culture can shift from this culture of stigma and silence to one of support and action.
That is so powerful. The issue can feel huge and overwhelming. And when you think about the numbers of how many people actually experience abuse, it can feel too big to change. But when you explain it like that, I think it's clear that we actually all have a role to play, and our individual actions do matter to the people around us. Keitha, I just want to hone in on one particular element of a caring conversation, this idea of being judgment-free. What does that mean, and why is it so important?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Many of us don't want to be judgmental in our lives ever, but there are lots of ways we might still judge a person going through abuse without even realizing it. Some classic questions are, why don't you just leave? How can you still love them? Why didn't you call the police? Remember that abusive relationships are complicated, scary, confusing, and traumatic. When someone confides in us that they're experiencing abuse, that is a difficult and courageous act. I often find it helpful to intentionally stop and think to myself, this is a really brave thing this person is doing. They're putting themselves out there, knowing that there could be judgment. It helps me reset myself away from judgment and towards support and care for that person. We don't want to cause any more harm to someone who has already taken the important step to reach out and make them feel judged in any way. We want them to feel safe and supported in whatever they may need.
Exactly. And more of us need to become judgment-free friends, family members, and coworkers when it comes to abuse. What else would you say are the key ingredients of a caring conversation?
There are 3 key things. So number 1 is focus on the person being hurt. Make sure you're not putting your own anger, shock, sadness, or fear first when they tell you what's going on. Check in with yourself. It's okay to have reactions. It's natural even, especially when you care for the person. But recognize what you're feeling, validate it to yourself, and refocus on their needs and what they're telling you, at least for the purpose of this conversation. Number 2 is to listen and let them lead. When we're having conversations, many times we're spending a lot of time thinking about what we're going to say next, rather than what the person is telling us. I do this all the time. We all do. It helps me to take a breath and tell myself, I don't need to respond right away. I can just listen and show I care. And sometimes we may want to make things better and, solve the problem. It might come from good intentions, but it's so important to let the person telling us about what they're going through take the lead on where the conversation goes. It's a way of taking back their own power. If you're not sure what you can do, you can always ask them directly, like just say, how can I support you? What would help you the most? And the third is to be patient and open-minded. You want to be judgment-free all the way through the conversation. Think about things like your body language and your face. Show that you're being patient and open. And instead of saying something like, what did you do? Or how did this happen? Make a point to say, it's not your fault. And you deserve to be safe and treated with respect. For someone being hurt, it can really help. It can also be the first time they've heard that in a long time. I understand we'll be learning more about what you can say in the next workshop.
Yes, that's correct. This has been a great conversation, though, to start us off and get us into the right frame of mind. Thank you both for everything you shared today as we head into the next workshop and carry into our roles as Signal for Help responders outside of this event. Any last thoughts, Anu?
I just want to say a big thank you to everyone here today. We know that these can be very hard conversations, but they are so important if we're going to ever achieve real change. And I think everyone's just taken a huge step being here.
Agreed. If each of us knows how to respond and support someone facing abuse in a judgment-free way, just imagine the collective impact on our society. This is really important. You should all be proud of the commitment you've made to learn and improve.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion. We're going to throw it back to Paulette for what's next.
That was excellent. I hope you're finding today's event useful so far. Next, we have a very special reverse poem with a powerful message to inspire you. The poem, written by Emily Donsos, will be performed by Harleen Bogle, a Montreal-based South Asian performer, writer, educator, and community organizer. Enjoy.
The signal for help. I raise my hand. I have hope you'll know. You'll see my closed fists so. I make the signal I need you to know. It means something's wrong at home. I need you to know it means I need help. I make the signal. You're right there in front of me. You don't know. I don't have to wonder if we'll let this keep happening. There's no way we can turn this around. Every 6 days, a woman is killed. That could be me. Hope for a better future seems so far out of reach. No longer a path forward. If I can just make the signal and know you'll see me. If I can just make the signal for so many women like me. The walls are closing in. The silence, the isolation. We can stop it. If I can just make the signal for help. The signal for help. If I can just make the signal, we can stop it. The isolation, the silence, the walls are closing in for so many women like me. If I can just make the signal, a path forward no longer seems so far out of reach. Hope for a better future, that could be me. Every 6 days, a woman is killed. We can turn this around. There's no way we'll let this keep happening. I don't have to wonder if you don't know. You're right there in front of me. I make the signal. It means I need help. I need you to know. It means something's wrong at home. I need you to know. I make the signal. You'll see my closed fist so. You'll know. I have hope. I raise my hand. The signal for help.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you for writing that poem, Emily, and for performing it, Harleen. My name is Suzanne, and I'd like to welcome each of you to our second and final workshop entitled Safe and Supportive Ways to Reach Out. We really want to hear from you, so we're going to be doing some polls in this workshop that you can weigh in on. You're going to find them in the polls tab on the right-hand side of your screen next to the chat tab. I know there's a few moments where those are just coming online, but be patient and they'll be there in just a moment. So when you post there, I'll let you know first when we have a question or a poll that we need you to answer. Once a poll is posted, you can answer the question at any time. So I'd like us to move over to the chat, and I want you to think about workshop 1. What's one thing that you learned or that really stood out to you from workshop 1 about caring conversations? I'm going to give you a moment to share your thought in the chat, and then we'll come back to your responses a little later. I also want us to dive a little bit deeper and answer the question, how can I be safe and supportive in a caring conversation? What can I do and what can I say? You know, remember, if you see someone use the signal for help, or if you're concerned about any sign of abuse, reach out to that person safely, find out what they need, and third, be supportive. Let's break that down just a little bit. When it comes to safety, people in violent homes and relationships may be closely monitored. This is important to keep in mind when you're responding to the signal for help or any sign of abuse. The person abusing them may watch where they go, who they call, or who they text, what they do on social media, and more. So I'm going to encourage you to reach out safely in 2 ways. The first way is to call them personally. Start by asking if they're alone. You could ask a question like, is this a good time to talk? If it's not a good time, be prepared to say something like, someone else is trying to call me, I'll call you back. If they are able to talk, you can move forward with questions that can be answered with a yes or a no, like, are you safe right now? You can also reach out by text. You can also reach out to them by sending a text, a WhatsApp message, or an email. Since these methods can leave a digital trace, say general things like, get in touch when you can, and I'd love to catch up. Regardless of how you reach out, this is your main goal. Find out what the person who asked for, what they need help for right now. They may want you to listen to them and be there for them, help them find services, call someone else to help them. Remember back what we said in workshop 1, your role is to listen and let them take the lead. Of course, note that the person facing abuse who is contacting you as their friend, their family member, or their coworker, they might want you to call an emergency service, but don't assume that that's what they want or need in that moment. Of course, though, if you see someone using the signal for help in public, out of a window or a door, calling 911 or emergency services is the appropriate response. Now let's practice and discuss what you could actually say at the start of a caring conversation with someone who might be facing abuse. So I know folks have left some comments in the chat, or we're trying to leave some comments in the chat. I'm having just a small technical difficulty in that it's saying that my chat is disabled. So we might come back to that in just a moment as we get that part worked out. So we'll come back to those comments in the chat, but let's think importantly that these conversations really matter. That's what Keitha and Arada were saying in workshop 1. These conversations matter. And I want you to just take a moment to reflect. I want you to think of a time when you felt really supported after you asked a loved one for help. Did they stay focused on you and what you needed? Did they respond to you without judgment? I'm going to be honest. In the past, when friends or family tried to talk to me about intimate partner violence and abuse, I didn't always handle it well. I was avoidant, I was judgmental, and there were times that I just ignored the signs that I saw. I thought, this isn't my business. I'm just going to make it worse. But I'm trying to learn and practice new skills and responses. Today, I'm doing my best to support a friend who is living with intimate partner violence and abuse. I'm trying to support her as she's living in a very difficult situation, a situation that doesn't have, a situation that doesn't have, where she doesn't have the financial resources to leave. And I'm sorry, everyone, my chat's now working. I've just gotten the information I needed. So we're going to come back to that, but I'm just going to finish my story for you. So as I was saying, today I'm doing my best to support a close friend who's living in a really difficult situation, a situation that she doesn't have the financial resources to leave. I know at first I thought, just leave. But then I took the time to really listen and hear her perspective. And she said to me starkly, Suzanne, it's either this or I'm homeless. And that made me pause and realize that there aren't easy answers. So I asked her, what do you need from me? She told me, 1, don't judge me. She told me that so many of her friends and family have asked what she did to deserve the abuse. And this started to make her think that she was doing something wrong. Instead, she needed a friend to say, no one deserves to be abused. The second thing she told me was, trust me and believe me. She told me that her partner blames her for his anger. She's too loud. She didn't buy the right kind of milk. She talks back. She pushes his buttons. She's crazy. When she hears these messages hundreds of times a day, she starts to internalize them. She needs a friend who will reaffirm that it's not her fault and that she is a kind and smart person who is in an intolerable situation. The next thing she told me was, text me regularly, take me out on walks. Knowing that a friend is around and checking on her helps her feel safer. And finally, she said, let me lead. Only I know what's going to work for me and what will keep me safe. Stay in my life, and when I need something specific, I will tell you because I trust you. At the end of the day, what she needs most is a friend, and I'm very grateful that I am learning to be that better friend. So I'm looking at the comments now, and I'm seeing a lot of things that echo that. I'm seeing people saying that we need to listen without judgment, and that questions can contain biases. And that's a really important thing to think about, think about the questions you ask and what kind of biases they might contain. I'm seeing comments about really being thoughtful about word choices and using those words to create safe spaces. And I think, when we are thinking about word choices and all of this comes to the idea of preparing, having a little bit of time to think about the kinds of conversations we want to have. And that helps us create those spaces for people to talk. There's a great comment that says, be there to listen and reflect with the person. It's about them, not about you. listen in that non-judgmental way, and create safe spaces. There's so many good points here in the chat, and I'm going to encourage people to keep putting those comments in there. I want to also just take a moment to share an example with you, a story from Laura. Laura is a friend of the foundation who's joined us on our podcast, All Right, Now What?, to share her experience with gender-based violence and what's helpful when responding to somebody experiencing abuse. Here's Laura.
I was in a relationship for about 3 years, and I'd say that relationship turned pretty quickly into sort of an emotional and even sexually abusive relationship. You know, I was in my 20s. I was actually going to university. I would, on the surface or outside looking in, had a great life, really stable family, all of that sort of stuff that you would assume someone has when they have a really solid life. So I think one of the big concerns I had thinking about sharing what was actually going on, you know, I would have to break this kind of myth, really it was, around the perception of my life. And then which would then invariably mean I would have to face what was going on in my life at the time. I think I was really concerned about being judged. You know, would people wonder, how could I let myself get into that situation? And, you know, and as the months and years actually went on to then, it got even harder to think about sharing, because then it would also kind of invariably, I think I would felt people would start to question too, why was I staying in this situation for so long? I think I also had some concerns that if I were to share, there would be this then instant pressure. Well, then I have to leave, and I have to leave right away. And I just don't think I was emotionally at a point where I was ready to make that decision. Once I finally made that decision, and it kind of culminated into a stranger actually seeing a situation between myself and my partner at the time that escalated it into becoming then known, I guess you can say. So then I had to face it. But I have to say there were a few really critical people in my life that were extremely supportive, made me feel safe. I have to say they were just intuitively knew that I would come to them when I wanted to talk about things, and they just let me take the lead in terms of getting myself through that situation. If I think of any skill or characteristic or trait that is so important, is in listening, and listening with your heart, listening with your mind, your ears, your body. I've always tried to practice that, again, in many situations in my life. And it includes, I think, listening also in the silence, to just be there, knowing that that person, because they have all of the necessary insights into their situation, that they can come forward in terms of determining their best way out of this situation, whatever that might be for them.
That's so powerful. You can hear more of Laura's full story on our podcast, All Right, Now What?, which streams on all major platforms. And I have to tell you, every time I hear Laura's story, I get goosebumps. I really feel what she's saying there. And I know that you do too. I'm seeing some wonderful new posts in the chat. I'm seeing comments about not letting fear or sense of danger or urgency take over conversation. And this theme of holding space, this theme of really making sure that you're showing up for that person in a way that keeps their needs in front. There's some great conversations going on there. Now, I'd like you to keep in mind what you've just heard, what you heard from Laura, what you see in the chat, what you heard from workshop 1, and let's do some scenario work. So imagine this first scenario. You're meeting up with a friend, and when she arrives, you can tell that something is wrong. She tells you something happened between her and her boyfriend. We've been fighting a lot lately, she said. And last night, he was so angry, he punched a hole in the wall, and I was really scared. What would you say to her? Please go over to the polls tab in the event section and go into there and vote for the response you think is most helpful. You've got that poll on the right-hand side. You could say, why have you been fighting so much? Why was he so mad at you? I'm sorry this happened. Are you okay? Go ahead and select your answer in the poll. I think I know some folks are still putting in the poll, but I just want to let you know that final answer, I'm so sorry that happened. Are you okay? That's the correct answer and the most helpful response because it focuses on the person who is feeling scared and at risk. And I appreciate this scenario a lot because it shows how doing things like punching a hole in the wall and breaking furniture, while not direct physical abuse on your body, can be physically intimidating and can make you scared about the risk of physical abuse. With this perspective, you can see how things like blocking somebody's way, taking their cane or mobility device, or shaking a fist can all be forms of abuse in a violent relationship. So let's go ahead to another scenario. You invite your coworker to go on a coffee break with you. While you're in line, she says, "Oh, I hope my husband doesn't find out that I've gone out without asking him." She looks nervous and then she says, "Actually, I shouldn't have said anything. I always say the wrong thing." Please go again to the polls tab on the side of your screen and pick the response that you think is most helpful. You could say, "You shouldn't have to ask permission. Why don't you stand up to him?" You could say, "I'm so glad that you said something. How can I support you?" Or you could say, "I speak my mind and don't let my partner disrespect me." As you're putting in your votes, I want to reflect on the answer that we feel fits best, which is, "I'm glad you said something. How can I support you?" This is the most helpful response. To be honest, I can see myself wanting to say option 1 or 2, but talking about what should be isn't always helpful in these moments. It can make someone feel judged and blamed for the way that their relationship is. And abusive relationships are often like this. People feel controlled, watched, their power is taken away, they're told they say or do wrong things. It weighs heavily on them. Saying, "Thank you for telling me, and I'm here to support you," can be a huge relief to someone facing abuse. Even if they don't want to talk to you about it right then, they'll get the sense that you're the kind of person to talk to when they are ready to talk. So great job on the polls. Just remember, for someone facing abuse, figuring things out takes time. You might need to have more than one conversation with them. And your role as a signal responder is to stay safe and supportive. Be there as they explore what works for them. Now, let's recap some of the key things we learned today in a short quiz. I'm going to ask the questions and give you some time to respond, and then we'll review the answers together at the end. I'm going to ask you to go to the polls section, again, on the right-hand side of your screen. And so the first question I have is, what would you do if someone tells you with a signal for help or in another way that they might be experiencing abuse? Please pick your answer. Would you call 911 or emergency services immediately? Would you ask them for details? Would you reach out safely and find out what they need to be supportive? Or would you start thinking of solutions and ways to offer help? Let's go along to our second question. It's important to support someone facing abuse without judgment because the abuse is not their fault. It lets them know that you are safe and can ask for help. It breaks down our culture of stigma and silence around abuse, or all of the above. So one last question before we review the answers. True or false? Being judgment-free means focusing on the person being hurt, listening, and helping patiently as they figure out what they need. That's true or false. So I know that you've been really participating in the chat and paying so much close attention through this workshop. So I'm going to go back over the correct answers, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to line up with what you've been putting in the polls. For question 1, what would you do if someone tells you they're experiencing abuse? The correct answer is reach out safely, find out what they need, and be supportive. For question 2, it's important to support someone facing abuse without judgment because all of those answers are correct. The abuse is not their fault. It lets them know they are safe and can ask for help. It helps to break through a culture of stigma and silence around abuse. And finally, being judgment-free does mean focusing on the person being hurt, listening and helping patiently as they figure out what they need. That is a true statement. So remember, when you're thinking about reaching out safely, the person seeking support may want you to call authorities, but unless there's immediate danger, do not assume that that's what they want or need. Every situation is different. Focus on them and let them take the lead. Sometimes they may want to make things better and solve the problem. This comes from good intentions, but it's so important to let the person seeking support explore what works for them and to be there for them along the way. On that question where all of the above was correct, it's important to remember violence and abuse are never acceptable, but people in abusive relationships are often made to feel like it is, like they did something to deserve this. Being caring, patient, and non-judgmental in our support says to the person being hurt, you deserve to feel safe, loved, and cared for. This could be the life-saving affirmation that they need. If enough of us speak up and learn to respond with care and compassion, together we can bring this issue from out behind closed doors and ensure no one is silenced, stigmatized, or left behind. And question 3, being judgmental or being judgment-free means focusing on the person that's hurt, listening and helping patiently while they figure out what they need. When someone confides in us that they're experiencing abuse, that alone is difficult and is a courageous act. We don't want to cause any more harm to them by making them feel judged in any way. Be mindful of our emotions, our body language, our words, and this lets them know and that you are helping them feel cared for and supported, and that they can be unashamed as they navigate their situation. And for someone experiencing abuse, that can make all the difference. Great work, everyone. So I've got one final poll question because we want to understand if this event was actually useful for you. This is a similar question to what we asked at the beginning of the event. At the beginning of the event, we wanted to know how comfortable you were if someone told you they were facing abuse. And at the beginning of the event, we saw lots of 3s, 4s, 5s, a few 10s, a few 1s and 2s. What we're interested in is for you to answer that question again. If someone told you they were facing abuse before today, did you know how to support them in a non-judgmental way? And now that we've talked about this, if you could put your new number in there after we've had this conversation on a scale of that 1 to 5, how comfortable would you be? How would you rank your knowledge now about how to support someone in a judgment-free way? Give you just a moment to get those to get those numbers into the chat. And we're going to take one last look at the chat for some other really good comments that are coming up here. And that's, there's an excellent comment about how control and abuse becomes normal. And that's why people stay in that situation for so long. You start to lose focus on what's okay. And I think that comment really underscores the whole work that we're doing here today, that breaking that feeling and really figuring out how to support a person to know that that's not acceptable and that isn't normal. So we're starting to see those numbers come in around how people are feeling. And it looks like many of you are feeling more knowledgeable now about how to respond to abuse. And that's so wonderful. I do want to suggest, if you haven't already, please download our Signal for Help Responders Action Guide. Everything that we covered today is in that guide. I want you to have it so that you can have a quick reference for what to do if you are approached by someone who is experiencing abuse. I know many of you have already downloaded it. Thank you so much. If you don't have it, please go to signalresponder.ca, fill out your name and contact information, and sign up as a Signal for Help responder. You'll get the guide And you'll also join a special learning journey, which will teach you more and you'll learn more about gender-based violence and how to respond. There's stories, quizzes, events, surveys, experiences like this, and more. And we've also posted the link for you at posted the link for you in the chat, and it's signalresponder.ca. I hope that everyone here feels very proud of what they've learned today and feels very proud of joining us today, being part of this conversation. Now back to you, Paulette.
Great work, everyone. And thank you for participating. We have one more performance for you before we end today. Please enjoy this spoken word piece by artist and activist Phoenix Pagliacci. It's called 540, inspired by the numerical representation of the signal for help. That is, when you count down 540, it makes the signal for help. You can even text the word signal 540 540 to know how to respond. Here's Phoenix with her original creation.
5. The number of times I'm less likely to fight, knowing that with every single strike from the love of my life, I will never be out of their sight, and I may never again see the light. You see, 5 is just one less than 6. The number of days that the cycle replays, for in 5 + 1 days, the violence persists. Every 5 + 1 days, a mother is missed and is taken by fists or by firearm, harmed by the one they once kissed. Every 5 + 1 days, we lose teachers, lose doctors, lose hope, and with every loss, it gets so much harder to cope. 4. The times I ignored what my friends said before about how what was performed behind closed doors was anything but the norm. It was me they were trying to warn. But I'm torn, for you see, once again, this same number 4 out of 10 is the number of women who have experienced intimate partner unrest. And up north, for our sisters, it hurts to my chest that they're 4 times more likely than Canada's rest to experience violence, and the stats suggest that not only more likely, more physical too. Our Indigenous sisters face more black and blue, and my heart simply breaks for what they must go through. For the number of women who fear for their lives every day, for their kids, for their safety, not just wives. They are bosses, caregivers, cleaning ladies, and 4 out of 10 is too many to not make it home to their babies. The numbers amaze me. But 0. The effort it takes to be someone's hero, to stand in the mirror and face what they are in fear of, what abusers seldom hear of. 0. The tolerance legislation has instated, no matter if you're married or you just dated, there's recourse for actions that cause pain, and it's refreshing to see. There truly can be justice for women like you and me. 0. The time that it takes to be the alarm, to bring comfort to hurt and bring right to those wronged, knowing all along that it starts with a sign. And even a survivor like I can find comfort in knowing that numbers save lives.
That was beautiful. And thank you, Phoenix. And thank you all for taking this time to learn and take action. I hope you're feeling more prepared and confident than ever to respond to someone who needs help. We all need to take action to address gender-based violence. Here are 3 things you can do right now. 1, learn at least 2 support services in your area where you can refer a loved one dealing with abuse, like a distress line, women's shelter, or family services center. 2, be proactive and check in with at least 1 person today. And 3, share on your social media what you learned at today's event and encourage others to get involved. We'll send you some support options, sample check-in lines, and social media posts to help. Together, we will change our cultural stigma and silence around gender-based violence to a culture of support and action. Thank you again for being here.